Alright, we're now looking at the Scandinavian opening, which begins after e4 and d5. Now black offers a queen pawn to exchange with the white's pawn on e4, and the idea is that white needs to make a decision about what to do with this e4 pawn. Now, white should take on e5, because if he plays something else, say like knight to c3, black can go d4, and this would not be good for white. Black gets more space. So he takes on d5, and black has two choices now. Either black will play knight to f6 first, or black will take directly with queen takes d5. Let's look at knight to f6 first. Knight to f6, the idea is to keep the queen in its home before it comes out so early in the opening, so it can't get kicked around. And he wants to take with a knight on d5 the next move. This seems like a gambit. You know, you can play c4 and immediately win a pawn. But after c6 and d takes d6, knight takes c6, followed by knight f3 and e5, you'll realize that your pawn here on d2 can't get to d4. So when you play the move d3, and black plays bishop to c5, black not only has a significant lead in development, but he also is restricting your d4 square usage. And this pawn here is very awkward. It's a backwards pawn, and it's stopping your bishop from developing. Instead, I think white can just play d4, and after knight takes d5, you can develop pretty normally. For example, knight to f3. If black plays bishop g4, then you can just go bishop to e2 and stop the pin. After e6, white simply castles, and if black plays something like knight to c6, then we can just play h3, bishop h5. And now we can play c4 to get his knight off this post on d5. When the knight goes back to b6, we support the c4 pawn with b3. And now when his bishop takes, we take back. And even if he wins our pawn on d4, we can win this pawn on b7. If he plays rook to b8, we can use a counterattack here and play bishop to e3 to gain tempo with development. And if he takes here, we can just take here. White will have the better pawn structure, and these two pawns are awkward. This rook here is also pretty awkward in between those two pawns. If black doesn't play bishop to g4 in this line, if you try something like g6 to attack your d4 pawn, we still have the same idea. c4, we get his knight off the d5 square first. When his knight comes back to b6, we develop simply with knight to c3 this time. This time we don't need to play b3 because we're not worried about this bishop taking on f3. This bishop will stay here on this diagonal, protecting the c4 pawn. When the bishop goes to g7, then now we go to c5. And if he goes to knight d5, now we can use the fact that the c4 square is open to put our bishop on c4. If c6, we can castle, and rook e1. The idea is that even though the d4 square is a little bit weak, in fact it's kind of a backwards pawn on a half-open file, if he tries to attack it with, say, bishop to g4, we can also attack his e7 square by playing bishop to g5. Now f6 here would be blocking this bishop in, so black will probably play knight to f6. And now we can even afford to give away the d4 pawn after h3. After trading on f3, if he takes on d4, we can take on e7, and if he tries to win our bishop here, we obviously win his knight on f6 as well. The other move that black can try here is playing queen takes d5. Queen takes d5 is the other line, and it's actually a little bit more common, though I think many white players prefer playing against this line. The idea is that the queen is attacked early on because it's developed so early. For example, right now, white uses exposed queen to play knight to c3 and gaining a tempo. The queen must move because it's attacked. There are a couple of ideas that black might try here. Black can try queen d6, but then white once again develops normally d4, knight f6, just knight f3, bring the knights out, and then after, for example, a6 trying for b5, we can play g3 to get our bishop to f4 to attack the queen once more again. And if he plays bishop to g4, bishop to g2, knight to c6, castle, we're going to try bishop f4 as soon as possible. So we need to get the pawn out of attack first, and after knight to b4, h3, bishop h5. Now we go bishop f4. White enjoys a good space advantage, and this position is very open for him to play. This bishop here will also later on put good pressure on this diagonal, defending this pawn if needed. Or if he loses a pawn, then you can also attack the whole diagonal here. In general, I think white has a good position in this opening, and he has nothing to worry about. The other line here is that you can play queen to d8, but this is just less active. Queen to d8 puts the queen back, so it ensures that it won't get attacked again. But the problem is then black just wasted 2 moves coming here and going back. Once again, this idea for white is kind of the same, just d4, knight f6, develop the knight as well. Once again, if black comes and pins the knight, we can actually try h3 this time. We don't even need to play bishop e2, because now after bishop takes, queen takes, black has to worry about this b7 pawn. He'll play something like c6, and then we can just go bishop e3, protecting our pawn with our bishop. And if e6, we have the opportunity this time to castle along, putting our rook on this nice file as well. If he tries to disrupt our pawn structure on the king side by playing bishop to b4, which threatens bishop takes c3, we can move our knight to e4. If he trades with us, that's okay, after everything is traded. Once again, white has the pair of bishops in this ending, and I think that's a good position for him to create an advantage out of. But the main move here is to play queen to a5. So the queen to a5 is kind of a happy balance. It's still active. It's controlling this long rank, all the way to h5. And it's not really going to be attacked since it's so far on the side of the board. But we have the idea, as usual, of playing d4 to get the bishop out and to control the center. The opponent might play knight to f6, and we simply continue with knight to c3, knight to f3. Knight to f3, we're developing our pieces again, and we need to support the d4 pawn, which may become weak later on. There are a couple ideas here. If black plays bishop to g4, we can go h3 now. Obviously, black didn't come to g4 to take the knight off immediately, so he'll play bishop to g5, bishop to h5. But now we play g4 immediately. And our idea is to, after bishop to g6, we just go knight to e5. After knight to e5, our idea is that we can put our bishop onto g2, attacking this long diagonal. And we will castle queenside, which should be much safer. For example, after e6, we can first attack on h4, forcing black to spend another move with bishop b4, making a threat to us. But eventually, after queen b6 and h5, the bishop will be traded with knight here. And after c3, white solidifies the center on d4. After more trades, for example, bishop to d6, white finally will castle queenside. And even though there's opposite color bishops here, look at the harmony of white's pieces. All these central pawns here are on dark squares, and he has a light square bishop. These pawns here are already advanced enough so that they can start attacking the king side if black chooses a castle over there. If black doesn't choose a castle over there and say plays knight to d7 for right now, then we can support e5 even more by playing the move f4. If he takes here, then we take here. We have the open f file for our usage, and this pawn chain is very strong. If he plays c6, then we can simply go g5 and continue our kingside attack. Queen c7 is fine. He can put more pressure. He can put all the pressure he wants on this diagonal. We put our king in on b1 to make it safer, put it on the light square where he can't check us. And this position is simply just very good for white. He can play g6 later on, and he's looking at g6, h6 ideas against the black king side. The other idea is to play c6 right now. With c6, it first of all gives the queen an option to go back, and also it creates a strong spot for himself on d5. We immediately contest that square on d5 by playing bishop to c4, and black will finish by playing bishop to f5 to get his bishop outside before he plays the move e6. Now, white will play bishop to d2. The idea is that this pin is going to be annoying. This pin is for sure going to be annoying. So we play bishop to d2, and the idea is that we stop this pin and give threats of perhaps a discovery later on. Black may play something like e6, and now white can play knight to d5, using this discovery immediately. As a quick side note, if black played something like queen to c7 to get his queen out of the discovery, then we can just play knight e5. After e6, queen e2, knight to d7, and once again, we castle queenside. If knight takes e5, we take on e5 ourselves. And okay, he might get the d5 square for now, but we have this nice advanced pawn on e5 that puts a lot of pressure on the opponent's position. Black's position will feel cramped with this pawn so far ahead, and we will have a nice position ourselves with a space advantage. If black plays e6 here, like I said, we will have the discovery on knight d5. After knight d5, if this queen comes back to d8, then we have no choice but to trade with the knight on f6. And here, if black plays queen to f6 to try to preserve his pawn structure, then we just have queen to e2, and after knight to d7, castle, knight b6, and followed by bishop to g5. The queen here is misplaced, and for example, we can already play d5 to attack the king that's still not castled. Therefore, black will probably play something like g takes f6. And now white can slowly press for advantage, considering that black's pawn structure is worse than his. Bishop to b3 is the correct move here to make the bishop not hanging. After knight to d7, we play queen to e2. Once again, we're going to castle queenside. We don't want to castle kingside here because this g file is open, and that could cause problems later on in the game. If queen to c7, then we castle queenside. He castles queenside, and then we go knight to g4. Knight to h4, sorry. Knight to h4, we're threatening to give him triple pawns, and not only triple pawns, after he takes, we can take on f7 as well. So black has no choice but to play bishop to g6, and then we can just go g3. The idea being that we'll play f4 later on, or bishop f4, to get more control of the dark squares. After bishop to d6, we can trade this knight with the bishop here, getting our pair of bishops advantage. His f-pawn can't take undoubling the pawns because this pawn will be lost. Therefore, he'll take with the h-pawn. And now we will play h4. Now, maybe you will think this black pawn mass on the king side is really weak. You might think this is, the double pawns here. With this just shape looks pretty awkward. It's actually not that weak, but the point is that white can use his pair of bishops in this open position, and for that reason, I think white is already better. Later on, maybe these double pawns will become weak, but right now, white should focus on using his space advantage and, once again, his pair of bishops. Going back for a review, after e4, d5, we have the Scandinavian, and after we trade on d5, we have two responses that black can play against us. After knight to f6, we simply develop normally with d4, knight to f3, and such moves. We can later on use the e5 square as well, and we will play c4 to kick his knight off of this d5 square later on. If he plays queen to d5, then we will attack his queen on d5 with knight to c3 immediately. And we can either use this queen later on with more attacks, for example, bishop to d2 and the knight to d5, discovery, or we can just simply get the pair of bishops in some positions and enjoy a nice comfortable position with more space, especially using the square e5, for example, knight f3, e5, and d takes e5 later on, getting us more space. A lot of times you might consider castling queenside because the kingside will be slightly weakened, and the queenside is simply just safer and the better choice, putting the rook on the d1 square immediately.